Alright guys, Rodney here with Sound Smith. I wanted to do a quick tutorial instruction video for you guys on how to put together the do-it-yourself ukuleles. So real quick first I want to run over some parts we've got. As you can see, we've already kind of painted on this one for fun. What you're going to have in your kit is you're going to have your ukulele body, the neck, you're going to have the fretboard, your tuning pegs. You should have 2 of these smaller screws for each tuning peg. To make this speed up the video, I've already put 3 out of 4 of these tuning pegs on. You'll also have these little collars that go on the tuning pegs. You'll have the bridge, and there's going to be 2 long screws to go with the for the 2 screws on the bridge. You'll have these 2 plugs and a bottle of wood glue. And then I guess lastly the nut. So yeah, here, let's get started and we'll go through putting this together. Oh, I guess I should also mention, I don't have them on yet, but the strings will also be in the kit for this. So let's get started. So for the first part, I'd like to talk a little about the tools you'll need to do this. The kit comes with a screwdriver and it comes with all the hardware you need. I would recommend that you get a tape measure handy, as well as a few clamps would be handy. If you have a bigger clamp, I'll show you in a little bit. I've got this is bigger than you need, but I've got a larger clamp that's going to help me clamp the neck to the body just to hold it while the glue dries. Now, if you wanted, you could probably use, at your own discretion, faster drying glues like a super glue. If you don't want to clamp it and you just want to hold it in place while it dries, you could use a fast drying glue for that, although for best results I would recommend wood glue and using a clamp. So having said that, let's start with the first step of locating and mounting your bridge. So for the first step of doing this, for reference, what I would suggest doing is go ahead and no glue anything, but just test fit. Just go ahead and slip the neck onto the body, and then we're going to use the fretboard. And what works well is if you line up this last fret with the seam on the body and the neck, go ahead and line it up like that, and you can line up the edges to get this kind of straight here, and then you can line up the gaps on the side of the fretboard, and where this ends at the termination of that point is a pretty good location to mount your bridge. So the bridge is going to go with the white bridge goes in the front and your 2 mounting holes are in the back. So if you line that up and you get it roughly, that'll get you really close, roughly where you want to be. And this is where a tape measure comes in handy. You can take this and you can measure from one edge down. I'm right about 2 inches down. And if I measure from this side, I'm right about 2 inches again. So that's actually pretty perfect right there. So, and actually, as I can see, is I've already got my holes set right there. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to move this out of the way. I don't need that anymore. And take my 2 long screws here, and I am going to go ahead and screw this down. Now, I've already started the holes for this, so it's going to be a little easier. When you're doing this the first time, what I would recommend doing is I would recommend going ahead and holding that in place and putting your screwdriver in there and giving it a few twists and push down with a little bit of force, and that will mark the wood. And then what you can do, I guess let me just back this out and I'll do it as if that's how I was doing it. So if you do that, you'll mark the wood and you'll see a spot where you've marked the wood for your screw to go. So then you can put your screw in. So then I'll take my first screw and go ahead and put it in there. And what that's going to do is that's going to hold the position. So, and you want to tighten it all the way down. So if I've got it, if that's tight, it won't move. I want to go ahead and loosen it up just a little bit so I can pivot this around like this. And then I'm going to put my piece back up here. I'm going to slide this to make that straight there. And then what you can do is if you mark your wood again, then you'll know that your two holes are going to be spaced just right. So if you need to mark it, you can slide this out of the way and you can push the screw in and get it started if you need to. But that's a good way to do it, to make sure that your holes are going to line up just right when it's all said and done. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to tighten these down and put the bridge on. And then I'm going to snug this one back up because I had loosened it just a little bit. And these don't need to be real tight. You just want to snug them up. You don't want to get them so tight that you strip them out. So that feels nice and tight. There's no play in it. So I've got the bridge on. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside for now. And next, let's do the tuning pegs. So as you can see, I've already done 3 of these to speed things up. And what you'll want to do is make sure that when you set these up, put it so that the screw is on top of the knob here. So you've got the shaft for the worm gear. And basically, this is called, if you've never seen this, is called a worm gear drive. But you want the screws to be on top so that way you don't have the knobs backwards the way that they turn. So to do this, and this wood's real soft, so what you'll want to do here is go ahead and put in your tuning peg. You'll take one of the shorter screws here like this, and this is, you can eyeball this if you want, or you can measure and get it as precise as you want. It's not a real critical thing that has to be perfect in this regard. So what I do is, because this wood's so soft, I'll line it up like that, hold it in place, and I'll take the screw, and if I just kind of push it in, put the screw in the spot, and then just push on it kind of hard, the wood's soft enough, the screw will just stick there, and that makes it a lot easier for you to get the screwdriver in and start to screw these in, because they can be a little bit tricky to get them screwed in. So that one is going. Go ahead and tighten that up a little bit. Okay. I'll take my second screw here and do the same thing in the bottom. So put it, and this will still turn, so I'll get that lined up about how I want it. And then I put the screw, and I'm just going to push down on it, so just press it into the wood a little bit so it'll stick on its own. Like that. There we go. Okay. And that'll do it for the tuning pegs. So we've got all the tuning pegs, and then we'll put these on when we do the strings, but these little collars will slide over that, and it cleans up the appearance of those holes and makes everything look real nice and sharp. So, but those will fall off, so I'm just going to leave them off for now so I don't lose them. Okay, so for this next part, let's work on getting the neck glued onto the body here. Now this part is where a larger clamp would come in handy if you've got one. You know, the better and tighter you can get this to be held on while the glue sets, the better this is going to turn out. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I've got this clamp. I'm going to use it, and I'll show you guys how I'm doing it with this, and you can do it however you would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually before I put this on though, because it'll be harder to see in the video, I'll explain how to line up and glue on the fretboard. So the way the fretboard goes on is, if you see the seam right here where the body meets the neck, you're going to line up that last golden fret right on top of that seam, and then you can kind of pinch the sides to get this on nice and straight, and that's where this is going to get glued on. And again, I'm going to put glue underneath. I'm going to use clamps like this, and I'll do that in a few minutes so you guys will see how I do that, but I'm going to clamp it like that. So in fact, you know what, let's just go ahead and do that first. So here's what I'll do. I'll take my wood glue, and when you put this stuff on, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and put some glue in here. I'm going to put a little glue on here. I'm just going to rub this on a little bit, spread it out. I'm going to try to get that on as much of the wood as I can. And same thing, I'm going to rub the glue on here and get it down. There's little textures and little holes in here that kind of give the glue something to bite onto. So I'm going to try to get the glue down and the texture good there. And then what I'll do is just how I described. I'll go ahead and line up that last fret with the seam between the neck and the body. This lined up good here. I'm going to take these clamps. I'm going to put one clamp right there. I want to go ahead and wipe off any glue that squeezes out there. Now that looks pretty good. So I'm going to just leave these clamps on and let that dry there. So now the clamps are on the neck, so I can take this back off. Okay. So clean off any glue that's squeezed out. Let's make sure this looks nice when it dries. Okay, that looks pretty good. So to go ahead and mount the neck to the body, let's take our wood glue again. And we're going to want to put glue on this surface here. We'll want to put a little more glue up underneath this part. And then we're going to want to put glue on the mating area down here and just a little bit above it. So let's go ahead and do that. And another good spot is to go ahead and get that glue on that wooden dowel too, because that's going to really set it into the body. Okay. Put a little glue up on this part. And I'm using a little more glue than I need to, because you really shouldn't have too much of that squeeze out. That's just because I got a little too much glue on here. So a little glue goes a long ways. Okay, that looks real good. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. Slide that on and be careful not to move my fretboard that I just put on. So now ideally, if you're doing this at home and you've got the time, it would be better if you have the time to, so there's a little wood glue squeeze out. I'm just going to wipe that off with my finger like that. And that'll rubs it right into the seams real nice. But if you've got the time at home, it'd be better to probably glue the fretboard on and let the glue set up and dry completely. And then glue the neck to the body as a, later, instead of doing them back to back like I'm doing. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to just show you how to do this. And then for the last part, to let this dry, I'm going to go ahead and put this clamp on here. And again, this is where this clamp comes in handy if you've got one. And you don't want to be, you get this clamp on here and you can squeeze it and it'll hold the neck to the body nice and tight while this dries. Now, you don't want to tighten this down too much. I mean, you could break this body if you put too much pressure on it. You just need to get it tight, and it'll hold the guitar, or the ukulele. It'll hold it up just fine like that. As you can see, I've used a little too much glue. I've got some squeeze out there, so let me wipe that out again. And then when we go to paint this, I can clean up that appearance, but that'll actually make a real nice strong bond that way. This side I did a little better on. Okay. So there you have it. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes. I'm going to come back and we can take the clamps off and I'll show you guys how to put on the nut, and then we'll string it and we can put our two caps back in here to cover up those screws for mounting the bridge. So I'll finish up a second part of this video here. I'll be back in a little bit when this dries and we'll take care of that part. All right, one other thing I should mention to you guys is with the wood glue, if you do have a lot of squeeze out and a lot of cleanup to do, the right and a good way to clean up that extra glue is to use a wet, like a damp, not really wet because this wood is unfinished, but use just a damp like cloth and you can wipe out that glue real nice. So you can do something like that and that'll do better than your fingers to clean up those edges. So I'm going to go ahead and do that there. Do the same thing on the other side, just to get a nice clean glue seam. Okay. And if you're wondering, this is for wood glue. You know, it's you're going to want to give it a good half hour to let things dry up before you take the clamps off. But realistically, the best thing to do would be to let it sit overnight. You don't want to put any stress on these joints. Like, you're not going to want to put your strings on until after this is set up for 24 hours. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Now, one last thing we can do is let's go ahead and put the nut on. So what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to turn this around this way so we can see a little better. Now I'm going to use just a small amount of glue here, and I'm going to go ahead and glue the nut right down to the wood here, and I'm going to do just a little bit of glue on this fretboard and just glue it right there in place like that, and then let it sit overnight to dry, and we can put the strings on tomorrow. So to do this, I'm going to put just a small amount of glue on here. I'm going to spread that out just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and on this, you'll see that there's a curve to this. You want to make sure that the flat side is facing the fretboard and the curved side that curves off like this is facing forwards to the top towards your tuning pegs. So I'll go ahead and set this on here. I'm just kind of working that in there to get rid of that glue squeeze out and kind of minimize the squeeze out. And I'm going to press it down so that it sits flat against the wood and against the fretboard there. And I'm going to just wipe off my squeeze out of that extra glue. And then I'm going to make sure I line it up with the edges of the wood here. Okay. We've got just a little more cleanup to do right here. And this glue does dry clear, so if there's a little bit of squeeze out that you're having a hard time cleaning it all up, you know, it will dry pretty transparent, so you shouldn't see it too much. So, okay, that's it. So we'll check back in 24 hours here, and we will put the strings on. All right, guys, so I'm back, and we are going to go ahead and undo the clamps, and we will get the strings on this thing and get it finished up. So let's go ahead and take the clamps off of here. All right, so I've got the strings laid out here, and this can be a little difficult to see, but the way I've got it laid out is I'm put the strings in order of how they're going to go onto the ukulele. So this first string, which would go on this peg right here and be the lowest string from the bottom as you hold it in this orientation, be the string in the bottom. This is going to be the smallest string. Then the next, I guess we'll go, let's see, so the next string up that goes on this peg, that is going to be the second biggest string. And then the biggest string goes on this peg, it's the third one, and then this one is the second smallest. So that's kind of confusing. So if you were to number these, starting with 1 being the smallest and 4 being the biggest, I guess it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be like this. It'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. So I hope that makes sense. But let's go ahead and let's get these strings attached onto the ukulele. So we'll take string 1, which is the smallest string, and what we'll do is let's go ahead and take your string, and you'll see the holes in here. So what I'll do is put this in that first hole, and pull some string through, and you want to make sure that it'll reach up to this tuning peg, and you want to have a couple inches pass, because you can take some scissors or clippers and clip off extra length that you don't need, but you want to make sure you leave yourself enough to get it on there good. So I'm going to take, and what I'll do is you take, and I've got some, you can see I've got some extra length back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it around the string like this, and then we're going to wrap it around a few times. Like that, about 3 wraps, and then I'm going to put it through the loop, and then pull it back on itself. And when you pull it tight, it makes a natural little knot over on itself there, and it's on. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just keep going with the strings here in the order that they go. So this is the next one here. And again, make sure you pull it up and make sure you give yourself enough length at the top. You don't want to short yourself there. And then one thing you can do if you want, you could take your extra bit of string if you wanted to do something to kind of dress it up. You can slip it through. You can go ahead and take that and slip it through this one as well. And that'll hold the extra string bunched up against the bottom of the bridge. And then when I pull this tight, and you'll see what I mean in a minute here when I get these all done. You'll see how it's kind of a cool little effect. Do the next string. And I'm trying to do these the same. I'm wrapping the same direction, and I'm wrapping the same number of counts on each one. Again, I don't think this is a too terribly critical step as far as the number, but it's nice to keep things the same for the sake of consistency. I'm going to tuck these other 2 strings through that loop before I tighten it. And so you can see as I'm doing this, if the camera's focusing there, you can see that it's starting to pull all the extra bits of string over to here. And what I'll do is I'll just clip them off right at the edge, and it's kind of a nice looking little way of doing it there. And the other thing you want to make sure is that you pull on this string, because I don't want the knot can't be sitting on top of the bridge. It needs to be further back. So you want to pull that tight enough that you pull your knot like that away from the bridge so that the strings are sitting properly. Okay, and the last string. And then again, before I pull this tight, I'm going to feed these other string tails through this loop so that they're all together. I'm just going to double check to make sure that I've got enough length up here for my tuning peg, and it looks like I do. So I'm in good shape there. I'm going to tuck these tails down behind the bridge to make them look nice and neat and kind of dress it up a little bit. Okay, so this one needs to, it didn't get in there. Let me get this tail tucked in there as well. There, that's better. Okay, so now to go ahead and string this up, maybe he's want to go this way. I guess I'll start on this side. So you want to make sure you get the right string on here. And I'm going to go ahead and you want the string to come up the middle and go on the middle on the inside of the tuning pegs, and then it's going to tighten, it's going to wrap around in this kind of a direction. So you want to do is make sure you turn the knob to make sure you know which way, when you turn it, which way it's going to turn. So if I turn this clockwise, like I'm screwing it in, I want that to tighten the string. And same thing on the other side. I want to have it go clockwise and screw it in to have it turn this direction so that it tightens the strings. So before I forget, first thing is put these little collars on top of the tuning pegs so that the headstock looks nice and clean. And then what I want to do is I'm going to turn this tuning peg to the hole kind of a sideways, and that'll kind of help me hold a little tension on the string when I get it in. So I'm going to go ahead and feed the string through. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it in its spot on the nut, make sure it's down in its groove, and I'm going to wrap it around, and I like to wrap it underneath the string to kind of keep that tail kind of contained there. I'm going to give it 2 wraps. And then just give it a little bit of a tug, and that should hold it. I'm going to just set it right there for now, so that's out of the way. Now I don't want to tighten the string just yet. I'm going to get everything put in place here. So I'm going to repeat that same step on this next tuning peg. tug. And that'll just folds the nylon string over so it kind of stays in place. So then what we can do is to lock that in. I'm going to screw a few turns here, just a little bit to get it to fold the string over so it holds place. And again, I don't want a lot of tension on this yet because I want to give the neck time to acclimate with the tension on it. And it'll be normal to hear a little popping and some noises as you tighten these. And what's happening is it pulls tight on the knots. These knots are going to slip and tighten up on themselves until they can't get any tighter. And so when you first go to tune this, just know that you're going to hear some of that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with your ukulele. That's normal. Okay, so let's do the next string. Now on this side, it's the same process, but we're just going to go the other direction because again, we don't want to go on the left side on all of them because it'll pull a kind of an unnatural direction on the nut. So you want to start in the middle in this one. And then the two middle strings go to the two top pegs. So this one's going to come all the way up the middle, and it goes through this tuning peg. I'm going to give it just a little bit of slack so I can wind up a little extra string on the tuning peg here. And this heavier string, I'm just going to wrap that one around one time there, and then I'll get the rest of the tension by tightening it this way. Okay, that feels good. And then the last one, I will go ahead and get this one done. So, okay, and again, I'm going to hold my finger like this to hold it into that groove. And then I'm going to turn this clockwise to go ahead and tighten it. Okay, so, all right, there you have it. We've got them all on. Now the only thing left to do would be come back with a pair of scissors, and I'd want to clip these strings off here to get rid of those tails, and I can come back and clip these off right here and eliminate all of these tails. And then what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and give this some time to acclimate the neck. So I don't want to put too much stress on this joint right away. So I'm going to give this a little bit of time to dry and acclimate with the strings on it, and then we can go ahead and tune it a little bit. So that should do it, guys. I hope you had fun with your ukulele, and yeah, if you guys had a blast with it, I'd love it if you guys take a picture and post it to our Sound Smith Facebook page. Send us a message with your picture. We'd like to be able to post them up and just hear your thoughts and feedback. Oh, and last thing, I almost forgot. We have these two little, I'm not sure what you call these, I guess little plugs, that's what you call it. So you take these little plugs here, and they just go in the hole on top of the bridge to cover up those screws, just so you don't see the kind of the uglier screwdriver there, the screws that hold the bridge in. So go ahead and pop those guys into place. Okay, and that one's a bit of a tight fit, but it's going in there. Okay. And there you have it, your DIY ukulele. So we'll let this sit for a little bit. I'm going to trim up these tails and then we'll get it tuned and have some fun and hang it on the wall. Something nice to look at. So again, if you guys like these, we'd love to see what you guys have done. Send us a private message on our Facebook page. I'd love to see pictures of your guys' ukuleles and love to be able to feature them on our Facebook page. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys have fun and let us know your feedback. Thanks.